Welcome to another episode of Behind the Strategy, helping you boost your business and love life that little bit more by challenging your perspective, motivating your mind, and simplifying your strategy with today's inspiring guests who'll be sharing what's behind their own strategy.
Make sure you pop that subscribe button and share with someone who needs this today.
Fresh out of the lab, because she really needs a shower, your host, Kate Whitley.
Well, thank you. And this is why I'm so excited to introduce to you my next guest, who knows all about self-care, Genevieve Borys. So what I love about you, Genevieve, is you are always thinking forward. You are always thinking carefully. You are thoughtful. You take in all the information, you weigh it up, then you decide, right, it's going to be like this. You're very clear in what you like or what you don't like, but you are an open-minded, forward-thinking person. That's how I see you. Would you agree? What would you say to that?
Oh, I mean, definitely. I'm an open-minded person. I'm in an open-minded profession that borders on science and intuition. I've always been open-minded because I think there's nothing more exciting than understanding and learning how other people are working and functioning and living their lives. Like, that is the most exciting curriculum for me to learn, is from other people. And you can't do that without a full sense of openness and really challenging yourself to think whether something is really something you don't like or something that you've been trained or conditioned or patterned to not like. So I always like to go into things with a really open mind and thinking, well, actually, what are my thoughts on this? Because why not? Why not? And who does it hurt and who does it help? So that's kind of my guiding principle and staying open.
And you've just proved my point about thinking carefully, knowing what you want to say, weighing it all up. And you've just proved my point as well. You actually do that. You've just so welcome to be here. Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to having this conversation with you.
Me too.
I bet you were a people watcher when you were younger, because the profession you're in, you are, a trained osteopath. You have your own practice, and very hands-on. Obviously science-based, so you're pretty smart there. And you had to, study hard to get that. But at school, were you surrounded by friends? Were you a watcher? What were you like to sort of develop this love for trying to understand people? What do you think impacted that? Have you always been like that? Or it's something you taught yourself as a child, perhaps?
I think growing up, I was really much more in tune with my emotions than I knew. I was very intuitive as a child. I was just one of those kids that would just get a lot of feelings. But I didn't really grow up with having much of a language to work with those feelings, to work with that connection. So I think for me, growing up, it was all about, and I mean, as a child, I would do a lot to please other people. I would do a lot to see what I could do to get other people to, basically as a kid, to like me, to trust me, to connect with me, because I had a deep desire to connect, but also being this really like empathetic, I think I had a lot of emotional awareness, a lot more than maybe a lot of my peers might have had, just in terms of like how sensitive I was as a little kid. It really pushed me to try and understand people on an emotional level first. So I think, some kids, like, they make friends because, they are playing basketball together or they have similar interests. That didn't matter so much to me. I was more about who can I connect with and who's going to connect back with me and what's that going to feel like. And I would say it was a little bit of a challenge because I didn't really have much guidance in that. I didn't really have anyone in my life that was like like, not that I didn't have anyone empathetic in my life, but you know what I mean? I didn't have anyone who was really dialed in to functioning on an energetic and emotional level. And so it was a lot of me trying to figure it out myself. So I think that's what really drew me into a profession where I'm working with people and just getting to hear their stories, but also not just hear their stories from them, but also physically experience their stories through the physical manipulation aspect of what I do, of listening to their personal stories, listening to what is happening in their world, and then seeing how it lines up in the anatomy of a human being is really special, I think, and really cool to do. So I really like that aspect because, you know, I certainly can tell a lot about people, not just by the words that they say, but how they hold their body, how certain things feel, how their body feels, how their body responds to touch. And it feels like such a privilege to get to do that for people in my profession every day, because I get to use those skills in a way that can support them in living a better life. And that feels really fulfilling.
Yes, and it sounds to me like you developed as a child because you weren't quite sure, you were feeling your way. You developed quite an analytical mind of how to work things out. So you were working out how to be around the children, your peers growing up, and how you would be able to fit in with that in a way that felt good. And I'm sure as a child, you know, you probably have childhood experiences where that didn't work. We've all had those experiences where things didn't work. We thought we misunderstood. We were misunderstood. I mean, we look back and, okay, they brought us to where we are now. But for you, that was developing like an analytical mind. But what I find really fascinating is that there's a sort of like a little missing link we haven't hit upon. And that is the desire to help people improve, to feel better, not just to find out what's going on and be privileged to help them, but you developed that as you were growing up, that you wanted to work out what was going on and how to help them. And so you said, you know, you're a people pleaser. That was to get people to like you. Hey, I think most of us were. Mm-hmm. But not everybody works out ways on how they can help people. Some kids grow up and they are naturally helpful. They just want to run around and you all know that kid. But not everybody was. It sounds to me like you loved people and you had a genuine desire to want to have positive vibes. So that would then mean your analytical mind looked forward by keeping that open mind into how you could help. So were you like a problem solver? Did you find as you went through your teens that you developed a really good problem solving brain, so to speak?
Yeah. And, you know, I think my love for people always extended beyond even just my own peers. Like I remember being in elementary school and I'd be the kid to like volunteer to do stuff at like the office. Like even though it was boring and mundane work, like it felt important to me to make myself useful, to make myself helpful to other people. And you know, I wouldn't actually think of myself as a very analytical I mean, yes, I guess I am analytical in a lot of ways, but I think now where I'm at in my life, certainly having gone through those younger years, is I do a lot more based on intuition now. I do a lot more based off of like what feels right, like energetically what feels right. Because I mean, I have gone through very analytical phases, especially in those early years. I felt that was one of the only ways that I could see myself as successful. I felt that in order to like achieve things and in order to be considered successful, that there wasn't much space for that in kind of like these airy fairy worlds of like creativity and art and some of the most beautiful elements of living. I didn't really see them as something that was valuable, even though it was something I was drawn to and I loved doing. I remember very much thinking like those things didn't really matter and they were a waste of my time because they weren't helping me make money like my job at the movie theater was, or whatever I was doing in those teenage years. That felt so important. But it was really after I finished osteopathic college that I feel that I recognized that there was something that was missing in how I was connecting to people. And it really came from opening myself up to being more creative and allowing more creativity in, that the intuition really started to flourish off of the analytical. So that's
really interesting, because it sounds like you're results driven as well, because you want to see a tangible physical or a feeling of, right, this is a result. I love the good feeling from wandering through the meadow and having a lovely day, like you say, or sitting and creating a piece of art or listening to music. But some of us are driven by actually having, feeling, seeing a tangible result. And that's a good thing, because we all need results, right?
Yeah.
The people that you help, they need the results that they need are so powerful, because pain, and I'm going to mention this because pain impacts our lives in so many different ways, where we will try and hide it. That impacts how our thoughts are, how we make decisions. We will power through. I mean, we all know how bad that can be for us emotionally and physically. We try and justify why it's okay to be in pain. People go through all sorts of emotional and mental processes with pain, don't they? Because as a human race, we are not very good at I've got a pain here, must go and get it fixed right straight away now. We're not very good at that, are we? Pain, emotionally or physically.
No, but I actually think pain has a pretty bad rap in the world. I really see pain as, pain is not anything comfortable. No one likes to be, literally, no one likes to be in pain. It is an unpleasant experience. But I actually think it's a very vital experience that we need to have, because that is what that is our body trying to connect with us. That is something real. Like, most of the anxieties and fears and struggles that we have, most of them aren't even real, because they're just stories we've told ourselves in our head about what might possibly happen in the future. Most of that's never actually going to happen. Some of it might, but most of it's never going to happen. But when we have physical pain, that is in the here, and that is in the right now, and that is existing in your body for a reason. And that is your body trying really hard to communicate with you. And we see it as, you said, we're not great at rushing off to go get it fixed, which I agree. A lot of people will go to a place of ignoring or suppressing, just taking medications, get it to go away, or being like, oh, no, it's going to go away. It's fine. But not actually putting any intentionality around what this messaging is telling me. It's not really giving us, we're really not taking the opportunity to start to see, when we have pain, it's an opportunity. And I know that might sound really difficult if you are someone who has experience in pain, you are in pain, or you have been in pain for a long period of time. And, I think that's because sometimes we associate this pain with this punishment, like we've done something wrong. But what if we've not done anything wrong? What if, at this point in time, your body is expressing pain because there is something that requires addressing, whether it be physical, emotional, mental, spiritual. There are so many different facets and layers to pain. And a lot of times we just think, oh, no, it's just my body, or just the muscles are tight, or just something's out of whack and I just need to get it corrected. Yeah, okay, that is the case in some situations. But when we have pain that doesn't go away, when we have pain that's longstanding, it's usually multifactorial, and there's usually a lot of facets to it that contribute to basically this tapestry of what's going on in your body. But it's there because that is, your physicalness in that moment needs something from you that it's not getting. And it needs your attention. So the solution usually with pain, people just want to know how to get out of pain, how to get out of pain. it's not necessarily about getting out of pain. It's what is this giving me? What is here for me in this? And the pain is going to be there as long as the pain is going to be there. It might be short-lived, it might be long-lived, but what's your alternative? To just sit there and be like, this is awful until it stops being awful? Or lean in and explore what this is really about, you know?
So what you're saying is that pain, and being that you're an osteopath, you are an expert on seeing pain in all its glorious forms. Pain is the body's strategy for telling us something, for trying to communicate with something. So what we need to do is we need to go behind the strategy. And I love this because strategy, for me, as you know, pulls through into all aspects of our life, whether it's our business, whether it's our planning of the week. But what you're saying to me as well is that within our bodies, we have strategy too. So you've just given me the example of we'll shrug things off. I had to go and stay in a hotel last weekend when I was down in London. It wasn't the most comfortable. Normally, if I travel, I'm in a position where I can take my own pillow, right? So the pillows were fine, but they weren't mine. So I've had a little crick in my neck for a couple of days when I came home. And what I did was exactly what you said. I said, oh, okay, well, I should have taken my own pillow. I knew I couldn't take the pillow, but I still blamed myself just at a tiny fraction level for not taking the pillow, despite not being able to. So what I guess I've done is I've shifted the blame of the pain, and I've stepped into that, and I've taken that on board as being my fault, right? So that, and because of that, I haven't been able to address the pain necessarily and think about it and think, oh, what should I be doing? And focus on perhaps what I could do is sit properly on my chair, she says, sitting up, and addressing, right, okay, what do I normally do to fix it? How do I do it? Because I'm thinking, oh, it'll go away. So when I was studying psychology, one of the first lessons one of my tutors said was, he said, don't separate the mind from the body. He said, because the mind and the body are one. They are one holistic thing. Without one, you don't have the other. And the mind can actually control. And he said, and I then learned how, if the power, when we're feeling depressed and low, we can feel in more pain. So therefore, this was in my very first lesson many, many moons ago. And he said, so therefore, I just want you to think at the start of you learning this, if you're feeling achy and pains because you're hunched for various different reasons, you could be depressed, there's going to be little impacts on the way. What if you switched that round? What if you switch that? Is it possible that you can heal yourself with the power of the mind? Is that possible? And of course, you can imagine how that opened up discussions of healing ourselves with the mind. But what I'm hearing from you is that, yeah, I mean, I agree. Well, I believe we can. But what I'm hearing from you as a practitioner, as somebody who's studied the science as well, and who is has to go quite intuitively on what your customers and clients are saying to you, you have to learn. You've learned to pick up what's behind their body's strategy. They may not know themselves. So am I on the right track here? Is this a strategy that we would need to take on board more about how we can connect with our mind and our body?
I mean, I think it's the strategy we need. It's the strategy that we don't even realize that we have. Like, we already have an innate built-in system to protect us, to secure us. I mean, you're literally a walking pharmacy. Your body makes all the drugs that all the pharmaceutical companies make. They're based off something your body either makes naturally or has receptors for or is found nearby in nature. That's that's how we were created, right? Like, that's where those drugs come from. They come from derivatives to change how our body is signaling or processing. But we make that naturally. So what's turning it down? What's turning it up? Why is it happening? I do think the mind is a huge part of our healing, but I think there's almost something more primal that I think we need to tap into, in that, what is this physical body doing? And what am I actually feeling? The number of people that come in and tell me they have hip pain, but they don't really know where their hip is very interesting. Because when someone tells me they have hip pain, it's very different from person to person. If we don't have a uniform language, I mean, we do like there is anatomy, there is, courses that people have taken, of course, and of course the medical people in medical will have this language, but us as the layperson do not. And that is probably one of the biggest problems that I see facing us, is this complete disconnect from the physical bodies that we live in, and a complete lack of understanding of how they work and why they work the way that they do, and why we get things like pain, by not being properly educated on how our bodies work. We all know how to use an iPhone. We all know how to use all the apps and all the functions on our iPhone, but you don't know how to get rid of your own headache. Something that there are some pretty easy things to do to manage them that don't involve taking, I don't know what it is over there, but Tylenols and Advils over here. So ibuprofens, that's what people will take to get rid of headaches. But there are several, depending on where the headache is, what kind of a headache it is. If people knew these things, they would feel a lot more empowered in their own body. They wouldn't fear pain the same way, because all of a sudden this headache would mean, oh, you know what? I just have a little bit of congestion going on in my head. Okay, how can I drain this? How can I support this? Oh, look, my headache's gone.
That steps nicely into, because when we met, Genevieve, we just clicked, didn't we? And we could have talked for hours and hours and hours about, all sorts of things, anything, conversation. We just clicked. And the reason is because you are one of the most powerful people I know, or most influential people to me, that talks about self-care. Now, everybody talks about self-care. People come from it from a different angle. I know some fabulous people who are very focused on different aspects of self-care, and they do it marvelously, I have to say. But for me, you encompass it in a whole, I say the word holistic because it is. And by that, I'm actually using it from the terms of being whole, not like some, the interpretation of the word holistic in itself. I mean, as a whole, self-care throughout the different aspects of our bodies, our lives, our minds, what we do, and breaking it down into components where we can then learn how to understand it. Because sometimes you say the word self-care and people think, oh, yes, day at the spa. I mean, yeah, hey, that is self-care. So is going for a walk. So is making sure you eat healthily. But all these things quite often are in isolation. But what I love about what you do and how you incorporate that into your world is that you bring it all together and you help people recognize that it's all connected. And that to me is what is behind your strategy of being able to treat a person from a practitioner's point of view as a whole, but also from a caring, empathic intuition, consultant, a coach, however anybody wants to view you. You take the whole being. You are so in tune with, like you've said, that the hip bone is connected to the thigh bone. Yeah, but then what? Is there a knee bone? And what is that knee bone doing? Does that make sense? Am I on the right track here about the self-care?
Absolutely. And I think pain has informed that for me from my patients, from being with them for, the last 12 years. And because it became very obvious to me early on that pain, yes, sometimes someone slipped on some ice and they've now injured their back, and it's a very mechanical approach. It's a very mechanical recovery because it was a mechanical problem. But there are so many different layers that we are as people, and they show up in our physical bodies. People feel pain when they have financial pain in their life. People feel pain when they have relationship pain in their life. They feel pain when they have an overwhelming environment that they work in, whether it's the people in that environment or whether it's just the physical nature of those places that they're existing in. So when I look at self-care, it's all about getting clear on what you as a human, as you as a person need and want to have in your life in order for you to feel like you're doing a good job, in order for you to be feeling like happy and excited and wanting to go on to the next step, because the journey can be hard, especially if there's pain involved. And there always is. There's always pain to any growth. There's always pain to any growth.
And that's the opportunity you mentioned earlier about what stepping into that opportunity, isn't it? But okay, what is happening right now? What is the opportunity? Does this give me the opportunity to look at what else is going on in my life? But trying to remember that that's what we have to do.
Yeah, because it is so multifaceted. And that's why I feel like my approach to self-care is very multifaceted. When I talk about self-care, yes, of course, I talk about physical body care, but it's also like how you think about your body, how you think about the food that you're eating, not just the food that you're eating, how you're thinking about it, how you feel about your physical environment. Like having a clean car is self-care for me. It makes a difference.
Oh my gosh, yes, yes. I'm with you on the clean car. Come on, listeners. Anybody out there thinking to themselves right now, she's got a point, I've been meaning to vacuum the front seat for the last 2 or 3 weeks.
Absolutely. As part of my self-care practices, like car detailing actually goes into my self-care practices, right? Because I can ride that out for much longer than I can ride out a massage. So it usually lasts a few months longer. So, but looking at all parts of us as it's our self-care is all about how you want to be and how you want to relate to the environment in front of you, and that you're in and you're immersed in. And it's really just about putting more things in front of you that you enjoy and bring you joy. And then all of a sudden things start to feel a lot more in flow, a lot more magical, because you are now surrounded in this environment where it's basically been curated for you. Who doesn't want that? But you have to do it because you're the only one who knows what you like. You're the only one who knows what really matters to you. And you're the only one that can do that deep work. But when you start to do that deep work and you start to surround yourself with even colors that you like, or clothes that make you feel good, or even just how you style your hair because it makes you feel good about yourself, all of those start to come together, and we start to really live in this sort of magical world because we designed it that way, because we took the time to consider it, because we can either exist in this place where we're just taking in everybody else's leftovers, right? Because a lot of people aren't doing this. A lot of people aren't thinking, oh, what would I like in my surrounding environments and what would make me feel happy? No, it's very utilitarian, and it's, I have what I need around me so that I can just get my shit done. And that, like, when we start to really get clear on what our values are, what we value, what we care about, we can start to surround ourselves with those things energetically, down to even down to my toothpaste. Like, getting toothpaste that I like aligns with my values. It aligns with getting a toothpaste that wasn't tested on animals, that has healthful ingredients in it, that, even down to the tube that it comes in. Like, those are all, that's just one example, but it's something I thought about and considered. And now every time I use my toothpaste, I'm happy, because it has the essence, the energy of all of the things that I want there for supporting me as a person, knowing it stands in my integrity, my values, and it's not just whatever I picked up at the grocery store in a haste, in a rush, whatever was thrown in front of me, because we live in a society that throws everything in front of you and asks you to pick. And a lot of times they're just telling you which one to pick, But it's only until we can come back to ourselves and be like, what do I actually want? What is actually in alignment for me? That we can actually make the decision. You're making the decision anyway. You're making the decision to buy the toothpaste anyway.
Yes. So therefore, to put more thought into it, we're in a situation where we take these steps. So let's just say we want to make a choice about how we have our hair, about what clothes we're wearing, exactly what you've just said. And if we find that we're in a position where we can't, we start saying, well, I can't do this because of that. There's a little path we have to follow, a story. Why is that? Is it an external impact preventing me? Can I do anything about it? Where will I have to compromise for now? But and there are going to be occasions where we can't financially choose which toothpaste we have. There are going to be cases where we can't get to the hairdressers to have our hair like we have. Those sound like not a big deal. It can be a huge deal. But we have to also learn, I'm guessing, to compromise along the way rather than trying to just suddenly go, right, I want everything I want into my world. You're not saying that. What you're saying is go deeper. Take each little aspect. So, for example, my car. Why haven't I gone out there? Now, I'm thinking as you were saying it, what excuses am I telling myself? Now, I'm just going to use the car for this because it's quite a fairly non-emotional, topic. I've told myself I haven't got time. Actually, I have, because when I think about the other things I was pottering about, I could have done it then. It doesn't take that long. It's too late in the day, I'm tired. Or should I have done it? I've heard myself telling myself some excuses. If I go past that, am I saying to myself, it's not that important? What's not important is when I get in the car later on, I know when I get in there, especially now we've had the conversation, I'm going to look around and go, I should have done this. And what I've done then is I've stepped into blaming myself for not being perfect. I'm blaming myself and telling myself off for not doing something I should have done. I don't want to put myself into that situation. Why don't I just do it? And it sounds like I'm going round and round the houses, but it is quite often these little decisions that we think aren't important. I mean, I could probably analyze, as a psychologist, as somebody who's, gone down this road, I could talk to you for an hour and come up with all sorts of different analytics, reasons why I haven't been out there to vacuum my car. My point is that we quite often do that within our own minds, don't we? We tell ourselves these stories, which is exactly what you said earlier, and that's based on our self-worth. Are we worthy of self-care? That's what I'm hearing from you, pulling through the strategy. And before we sort of go on to some, ways of looking at how we can try and step into shaking that off, being a bit more positive thinking. And I don't mean to belittle anybody feeling so down they can't, but just some simple thoughts that we could come up with. There must have been a time when you were going through that yourself and that impacted you, your decisions and your own self-care. And for you to then come out the other side and go, hey, this needs to stop, because there may have been external factors impacting you. So was there a catalyst for you that suddenly made you say, slam that desk, damn, I am now, this is what happens. This is the world. I am me. I'm going to deal with this. And this is how I'm going to do it.
Yeah, for sure. I have a few thoughts on a few of those things. In terms of things being, I might not have the money for this. It doesn't necessarily need to be about money. It's more about the intentionality of what we're doing. You can't go get a haircut. Okay, but you could probably buy a box of dye at the store, or you could probably call up a girlfriend who does hair. There's almost always options. And a lot of times we use money as the limiting factor. I, for one, certainly used money for a really long time as a limiting factor of a lot of things for me engaging in a lot of activities, a lot of things, because I felt like, I couldn't possibly spend my money there because I needed to put it towards these other things that weren't even necessarily in alignment with my values. They were things that I thought I needed to do because that's what society told me was important, or, that your money needs to go in smart places. But now I think there's nothing more smart than putting them in places, putting them towards things that help me feel more in alignment with myself, because at the end of the day, I have me. Like that's what I always have to double down on. That's what, like, I have to double down on me every single day, because we live in a volatile world right now, and there's a lot happening right now that is out of all of our control. And because of that, our option is to go along with the flow of that and just, pray to God we don't get like smooshed in the process of everything that's happening. Or we can double down on ourselves. I run a business right now in an extremely uncertain time, where we've just come out of a pandemic, and who knows what's coming next, because things certainly don't feel settled and things certainly don't feel finished. So, it has forced me to have to keep doubling down on myself. Because what's my option? What else is my option right now? So in 2020, finding out, like, we were shut down, me personally, I was not able to work for 9 months, 9 full months. I was not able to physically go to the job I was trained to do and is my vocation. And it forced me to have to get out of this place of this is all happening to me into, all right, well, this is happening for me. So what is here for me? Because I can sit at home and bemoan the fact that all of these things are happening, but they're happening regardless. So if I just know that I can double down on myself, if I know what I like, I know that I'm doing the best that I can, that I know that I am showing up in the best way that I can, like, isn't that kind of like the point of living, isn't that the whole point of all of this?
Yeah, totally agree with that, because that impacts how you are with other people around you. And then that's going to have a knock-on effect on them when they see somebody that can have this perspective, that they see somebody else. They may not have the confidence themselves, or they may not have even thought of doing that, and you're role modeling the way that is possible. You're role modeling potential within ourselves, possibilities that we can try out, and we're not looking for that. So, it seems to be behind the strategy of our self and our self-worth is to not look for the perfect way to be. It's to look for a way to live where we can live with ourselves.
For me, the goal is like, how do I make this just a little bit better? So like when you're talking about going into your car and you're like, oh my gosh, like there's so much to do. Of course, it's super overwhelming if we start to look at all aspects at all times and say, oh, everything needs to go. But this is about those micro changes. Like if the car is a mess, you don't need to go to detailing it right away. You could start with a garbage bag in your car. That's a great place to start sometimes, it was a good place for me to start. And I was like, oh, I like not having Starbucks cups all over the bottom of my car. That's something I value. That's something I want to keep doing, right? So, so I do think, and for me, I would say 2018 was a really tough time for me, a really, really tough time, a time when everything externally looked like it was great. Externally, you would have looked at my life and like, oh, like she's just getting everything that she wants right now. But privately, emotionally, and what was actually happening to my reality was not that. It was a really difficult time. And I ended up joining this mastermind program, and one of the first things they asked me about was my self-care, and to rate my self-care on a scale of 1 to 10. And I was like, what even is this? Like, what even is, I guess, a 4? I rated myself like a 4. And then when I started looking at all aspects of my self-care, I'm like, what do I even like? What is even here for me? What have I just picked up along the way because it's been shoved in front of me and marketed to me and I've been told was important, but like, what do I actually care about? And when I got really clear, all of a sudden, I really started to appreciate a lot more things in my life. All of a sudden, my home, like, I had always felt like, I mean, I love my home. I absolutely love my home, and I feel so grateful for my home. And we had just moved to this home in 2018, and I always kind of thought, well, it needs this, and it needs this, and it needs this, and it needs this. Maybe one day we'll move. Maybe one day we'll get something bigger. Da, 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 da. When I started really, really getting clear on my self-care, all of a sudden, this home that I thought needed all of these changes, I was like, oh wait, it's already perfect. Like it was like that, and it's like I didn't have to do things to satisfy myself, to satisfy my life. They were already there. I just had to see them as satisfying because I was clear on what I cared about and what I felt was important, and that it aligned for me in my life. So and self-care is what informed me that these things were what I actually really wanted. That understanding, that worthiness, that all of this, like I was worthy enough to do these things for myself, and me wanting something was a good enough reason for me getting something. And again, I don't mean that in like I'll just go buy anything I want, just like understanding that, like, you know, if I wanted to feel better about myself, it was going to require that I invest in new underwear, whatever it was, right? Like, if I didn't want the holes in my underwear to still be there, I was going to have to do something about that. And it doesn't necessarily mean buying the most expensive things, but now I'm a lot more conscientious when I purchase things. I waste less. I'm clear on what I want. I spend my time figuring out what it is that what experience I'm looking for, what it is I actually want. A good example of this is my kettle. We needed to get a new kettle. And I'd like to remind anyone listening to this, like, nobody wakes up with like perfect self-care, and nobody wakes up, becoming rich one day. And then like they walk into this home and like everything is perfect. Like, it is all a process. Like, nobody wakes up and they're like, I'm rich today, so now I have the expensive pens and I have all the expensive fancy things. Like, and do you even care about those things? do those things even really matter to you? You don't know until you spend the time informing yourself about the things that you value, the things that you care about, what your own personal core values are. And when you're clear on those core values, you can start aligning your life. You can start getting all the pieces in alignment to literally create this fantasy world that's not fantasy. It's grounded in reality. You've just made it happen.
Yeah, I love that. And that's what I do. I help people design what they want for their business, but it's also connected to what they want for their lives. The two are in a tandem with each other. What you can't go to work without having after work. You can't have a time when you're not doing anything without then thinking, I have to go to work. It's the same thing. It's about designing what fits around it. So, I've loved this conversation, absolutely love this conversation, because we've ended quite nicely on what is literally behind the strategy that we can all step into. And what you're saying is, and I wholeheartedly believe this, is that firstly, we need to remember who we are. And find out and look forward to finding out and reminding ourselves of what brings us joy, what do we like, what are our values, what do we believe in, just within ourselves. It doesn't have to be for the business, for the family. First of all, focus on who are we and what do we want. I'm guessing that's the first place to start with. And then reminding ourselves that we are important enough to make some choices, and then going from there, what are the choices we're going to make? And we've discussed that as well. So I guess for me, trying to sort of pull together what is behind the strategy, because that's the whole purpose of the podcast, is you're saying take back the power.
Yeah, take back your power in the form of being really clear on what you value. Being really, really clear on what you value. I mean, yes. Bringing that back to the pain conversation from earlier, I know it's a little bit different in the UK there, but a lot of people here pay for my services. Some have insurance, some don't. But when I think about that, it's some people will say to me, "Oh, I can't come back because I don't have insurance anymore." Yet, they have the newest iPhones, they've got the newest things, and that, like, what that is, and I mean, I certainly for some people, of course, there's an affordability issue, but like, what are we valuing, right? And like, is it valuable enough for you to pay for a service out of pocket because it actually makes your body better? Like, that is an important thing to consider. Are we avoiding those things? They make us feel better, but like, we fill our minds with like, oh, I'll just buy more stuff to make me feel better. I need to get the new travel mug, or I need to get that new phone, or I need to get these new things to make me feel better. But really, we're avoiding what would probably actually make us feel better. And that is because figuring out what makes us feel better is going to involve pain. It's going to involve discomfort. It's going to involve, at least, even if it's just momentary discomfort of considering, it's going to require us to have to look at the whole of us.
Because it's about compromise as well, isn't it? It's like we don't like the fact that we might have to compromise. So we sometimes avoid making a decision because we have to compromise. So I also had to buy a new kettle last week, and what was I prepared to compromise on? I was not prepared to compromise on having it so that it wasn't corded. It was a cordless one. I was not prepared to compromise on that. That's quite, just using that as a very simple example. So therefore, that meant that I was looking within a certain price range. Right. Okay. When it comes to our health, our self-care, we are compromising something even more important than having a thing. Yes, I need that kettle, but you know what? If I didn't have the kettle, I could still boil water in a pan. At the end of the day, I could still have hot water boiled to 100 degrees to make tea, because it has to be done to 100 degrees in the UK to make tea. Just putting that out there. It's the law. It's written in the constitution of the country. And so, there are things that we compromise without realizing that we're actually compromising our decisions. I'm sort of wrapping it up as we go. I truly believe that when I'm involved in doing lots of things and have lots of things, I become a little desensitized to the simple things in life and the simplicity of just sitting and appreciating some flowers, or going for a walk and smelling some mint that's in somebody's garden. I forget that I enjoy that and I like those. And those are such brief little moments that it's almost like we don't count those because they're so brief. But actually, I truly believe that a strategy that we need to bring into our life is to go back to some of those simple things, because it then reminds us that we can live with that, with our values, with our self-worth, with our self-care. Otherwise we get caught up, like you said, into having to look externally. And so I would say that what we're saying is we're not just taking back the power then. We're taking back the power from what is within us. We have to look internally rather than looking externally to help us take that power.
Yeah, and I guess we don't even have to take the power. It's just there. It's already there. Like, it's already there. You have to just choose to tap into it. And to tap into it, you're going to be in pain at some point. Whether it's physical, mental, emotional, it's going to come up. So you need to be willing to walk that pathway and be open to it. But all of a sudden, a lot of these other things start to fall away. The things I was talking about the kettle earlier, and then the kettle we ended up purchasing. Like, I remember comparing them online and being like, which kettle? Like, I'm like, okay, like what, like, how often do I replace a kettle? What am I going to, what do I value here? I wanted something that was aesthetically pleasing, but I also wanted something that was going to keep me mindful, because usually pouring my tea is a part of more of a ritual for me. So I got one with like the gooseneck spout, the fancy little like thin spout. And now and it holds the temperature. I love that it holds the temperature. And the amount of joy that I get out of this kettle is ridiculous, because every time I go to pour and then I'm like, it's not fast enough. And I was like, oh, right. No, I bought it. I bought it because I need to use this moment to just chill for a second. So by building in these things, and the things that I love too, it's this beautiful kettle that I freaking love. Then every time I go to pick it up, I'm like, oh, I'm so glad I got the one that holds the temperature for an hour, because I always forget to pour my tea after I boil it. And I'm so happy that it's slow, because I have burnt myself far less now that I take my time, because in what universe do I need to pour boiling water at speed? You know, I really had to check myself with that. And I was like, right, I could take my time with boiling water. It seems reasonable. And that brings me a lot of joy. And it's just that strategy of, all right, like, what do I care about? What matters to me? How do I bring more of it into my life in everything? From my kettle to my car garbage bag, you know, how do I bring those things in? And then all of a sudden things start to flow a lot differently.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. And with regard to the kettle, I too made the decision that I knew within my life I needed to drink more herbal tea, more fruit tea. And you boil it, but you don't need to pour it on 100 degrees. You need to let it cool down. So when I found the kettle that has temperature variance on it with colours as well, because I like it to be clear and I'm a colour person, that to me was like, I can now set the kettle. It's going to be at the right temperature for me to pour it straight away, and then I will drink more of that tea. So I hear exactly what you're saying. It's about what do we need to do? What can we compromise? And, you know, this conversation with you has just been, we've covered so much ground. We've gone from, you know, physical, emotional, purchasing power, you know, everything. It's all about stepping into who we are. And this has been absolutely fantastic. I thank you so much for joining me today. Honestly, I know we could talk for hours more, but I want to just say thank you so much for bringing to me your strategy, for sharing it, and then for letting us look behind that strategy so that we too can incorporate those things and just be more mindful. You've been marvelous. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And if I can throw this in at the end here, you keep talking about compromise, but I actually don't think we need to compromise. We don't need to compromise for us. Like that, like the compromise doesn't need to be us. We're not the compromise. You never need to be the compromise. You might need to be compassionate to where you're at. You might need to be like compassionate to the fact that now is not the time to maybe spend a whole boatload of money getting your hair done professionally and you buy the box instead. But whatever it is, you don't ever need to compromise. You are not the compromise. In fact, I would say the exact opposite. You can't compromise when it comes to you and your values. And when you don't compromise, that is where the magic lives, where you don't compromise. And it doesn't need to be about the most expensive and the most everything. It's about what is in alignment for me, what makes this easier for me, what makes this feel better for me. So those are my finishing thoughts.
I love that. Thank you. Because no, that's a lovely way to end, because you're right. Absolutely right. Compromise, it's about working out what we can and can't do, but it also means that we're settling. And you're saying don't settle for anything less than what you are, for you. Don't settle at the end of the day.
Yes. And be compassionate to where you're at, but there's always an upgrade to be had. There's always an upgrade. Most don't cost anything, and you can always upgrade for yourself.
No, and you don't have to do it all at once. Yeah, I guess we don't have to do it all at once, all at the same time. It's a work in progress. We are evolving, aren't we?
Always, every day, every moment.
There we go. Thank you so much for being with me today and having this marvelous conversation behind the strategy.
Thank you for having me. This was great. I enjoyed it.
You've just listened to a Strategy Success Lab production of Behind the Strategy with Kate Whitley, bringing you inspiring guests and motivating messages to challenge your perspective and simplify your strategy.
Don't forget to subscribe and pop over to strategysuccesslab.com for more exciting episodes. And if you've loved this episode, go and share it with someone else who needs it today.